All right, good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon.
It's like speak and response. How y'all doing?
Good.
Okay, thank you all so much for joining us this afternoon. We have a panel here, and we're going to talk about building capacities at minority serving institutions and the work that's being done at Complete College America by way of a special project that's been funded by Kresge. So this is who we are. And what we do, so you'll see that we have, well, we can say, I'm Nia.
Johnny.
Nina.
And I'm Ruth. And you'll see that our responsibilities on our campuses vary a little bit across the board. We're from different areas of the country, but at the core, we all have the same fundamental concern and commitment, which is working on ways to increase college completion and student success at our institutions. So this is our plan for the next 45 minutes or so. We want to provide an overview of what this project has been working with MSIs, give you a little bit of context when we talk about capacity building and what exactly that means, discuss briefly some strategies that have worked on our respective campuses as it relates to this work, and how we have used state policies and policymakers or opportunities for engaging with them to further our strategic agenda as it relates to college completion on our campuses. Talk about scalability beyond MSIs, because although this project has focused on minority serving institutions, and when we say that, we're talking about historically Black colleges and universities as well as Hispanic serving institutions. So although the work has initiated for this project on those institutions, in those types of institutions, we firmly believe that the work that we're doing is transferable and scalable to other institutions within the state. So having a little bit of discussion about that. And then an open discussion. So hopefully we'll have some time for questions where you can ask us some things or maybe share some successes that you've had on your campuses. So just a little bit of context. CCA received some funding from the Kresge Foundation to support a pilot program with a small cohort of HBCUs and HSIs to implement one of the game changer strategies, which was 15 and finish. And some institutions were in the middle of that process or initiating that process. Some had not started, but the idea was to start with something that could hopefully be easily attainable and to gain a little bit of momentum on our campuses around what the game changer strategies could be and how we might go about that work on our campuses. So we had some commitment from institutional presidents, and they all they compiled teams on their campuses, and then we started the work. And so over the last year, individuals on campuses have been collecting data and sharing data and strategies that have been used with the ultimate goal of being able to create some type of repository that will be shareable among not only the institutions in the cohort, but hopefully the broader higher ed landscape. So capacity. When we talk about capacity, we're talking about identifying achievement gaps through data. So we have lots of anecdotal stories about what our students need and what strategies will work, but really digging down deep into our data to see what do we know about the different groups of our subpopulations within our student demographics. And then investigating opportunities to address those gaps. So what opportunities exist, which opportunities can be created in order to address the specific gaps within our student groups. And then fostering partnerships. So those could be partnerships around structures that exist within our institutions or across the state or similar types of institutions, but looking at all those opportunities to be able to get, again, more momentum for our programs. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about strategy. So the panelists have a couple of questions that they've been asked to consider and to share with you their perspective and what they've done around these different issues. And then again, if you have a question, please feel free to ask your question, and then we'll have some time at the end as well. So strategies, and you all can jump in wherever you. All right, so the first question was, and I'll read it just in case people in the back can't see. If you had to identify one initiative that you've instituted as a part of your MSI project that facilitated you in capacity building around student success on your campus, like what would that one initiative be?
Ladies.
Okay, I'll start. I'm Ruth Jackson, and I'm the Associate Vice President for Academic Affairs, focusing on student success at Langston University, located in Langston, Oklahoma. And our initiative really was born right after we attended the CCA convening in last November. And we were completing the chart to look at how many students are actually enrolled in 15 credits and how many complete 15 credits and 30 by the end of the year. And honestly, we had never looked at that. And we were devastated to see the low number of students who were enrolled in 15 hours. We were operating under that traditional, conventional wisdom of start with 12 hours and ease into college. But we had a complete shift, understanding completely the benefits. And so we started with that and thought, what are the multiple ways that we can get students to complete 30 credits by the end of the year? And we started looking at some of the other data that we were collecting, particularly our DFW report. And we noticed that very many students were having a very tough time getting through the general education courses. We serve about 88% students who are first generation and or touched by Pell. And we knew that we had to do something to give them an opportunity to catch up. They fell behind, we know this, how can we catch up? We did not have a very robust summer school program. About 50% of our students are from outside of the state of Oklahoma. Many of them, as I said, are first generation, so money becomes an issue. Many of them have used the summer to go home and work to earn money to return to school. So we decided to implement what we call Maymester. We utilized the 2 weeks at the end of the spring semester to give a very intensive 2-week, 4-hour-a-day course where we gave our students an opportunity to recover some of their general education credit. So we started this planning in January of 2018. Noticed that by the end of the fall semester, 191 students, freshmen, had D's, F's, or W's in general ed courses. So we identified 8 courses that we would focus on, and it really turned out to be striking gold. We've had some phenomenal results that came out of that project, anecdotally and quantitatively.
We'll talk more about it later, but thank you. Who's going next?
I'll go.
Okay.
So my name is Nina Corson, and I work for Pima Community College in Tucson, Arizona. And when we embarked on the Guided Pathways initiatives last year and the 15 to Finish initiative, we sat down and we tried to map out how can a student finish if they take 15 credits every semester. And of course, we want them to be done in 2 years. And we realized that we had a number of associate degree programs that you couldn't finish in 2 years, taking 15 credits. We have credit creep. We had credit creep at our institution. All well-meaning. And a little about my background, I'm a former math faculty member. I voted to change that college algebra class to 4 credits back then. Even though it's 3 at all the transfer universities, because I thought it was better for our students to have a little bit more time with them. But what we didn't realize was that the students could no longer finish in 2 years. We have a thing called the AJAC, the Arizona General Education Curriculum, which is your gen eds. It's supposed to be 35 credits. All of our gateway math classes were 4 credits. You couldn't get that done in 35 credits. And it's not just math. Our Psych 101 class was a 4-credit class, Introduction to Psychology. Well-meaning, but as you laid out a 15 to finish plan, you couldn't finish. The finish part just wasn't there. So what we did is embark on a course audit. Every single course was audited by our faculty. They had to go out. We gave them our peer institutions. We have 10 peer institutions that our IR department compares us to. We also have a list of aspirational institutions, Aspen winners, other colleges around the country doing great work. And we asked our faculty to look at every class. We even had a little database where they had to enter how many credits the class is and what are the prerequisites, because in some cases we attacked on a lot of prerequisites that other places don't have. So after the audit was complete, we went and changed the credits of a number of our classes. And in doing that, that was a huge effort. Every single class in our course catalog was audited. Nobody was happy about doing it at first. It was controversial. That's what we did in the fall. In the spring, we rewrote our programs. Every single program of study was rewritten. And we've implemented those this fall. We did almost have a disaster. When you rewrite a program, you probably know you have to submit that to the Department of Ed and get approval before you can have offer financial aid for it, Title IV financial aid. And we didn't think we were going to get it in time. Registration was about to start, and we were about to revert to our old catalog after doing all of that work. But thankfully, we did get the approval just a few days before we were about to turn around. So that was great. And anyway, that's one of the initiatives that we did, and it was really significant. It was a lot of work, and it turned into something really good for our students. So, thank you.
Well, arriving at the institution, Mississippi Valley State, in February, and given the opportunity to work with the president, the local legislatures, the community stakeholders, internal stakeholders as well, is that when we start looking at student success, it was good coming back to the university to help out the new president, I was given the latitude to ask the hard questions. The first thing, when we started talking about student success, I needed the executive cabinet along with external stakeholders, legislatures, community leaders, internal stakeholders, faculty and staff. I need for you to define student success. What is student success? You hear this buzzword all the time, student success, but what is student success on your campus? Is student success graduating with a degree in 5-6 years that's based on your average? Is student success, how student success is defined by each academic program? And once we started that dialogue, and really gave us the opportunity to really dive into this Complete College America initiative so that we can be proficient and also be effective. Because when you talk about allocating resources, that you really need to define student success and also being able to really look at the data. Data being the buzzword, on a lot of different campuses, we have to look at the data, analyze the data, but how are we actually analyzing this data to measure up, to use that data to measure up to our goals and objectives for student success? So that's what we did at the beginning, and we can talk about more about that process later, because it was really let's define who we are, what is student success, how are we going to get there, and most importantly, how are we going to sustain student success? If this is a project that we're going to participate in, and then after years, this is something that we should be evaluating on an annual or 3-year basis, just like you do accreditation, to keep it moving so you can graduate students in a timely manner.
How long did that process take for you all?
Well, that conversation took about a good month, because there were so many different definitions of student success. You had the students who are majoring in our STEM programs. They define student success in a different way. The administration was defining student success in a different way. The community stakeholders were saying that we need students to come out and get a job and invest in our community. So student success was defined in so many different ways. So it really took that time to really dive in deep before you get started. You can't write a student success plan when you really don't have everybody on the same page in regards to student success. So it took that time, but it's moving forward.
Okay, and the reason why I asked that is because when you listen to them, so all these initiatives were initiated and implemented in a short period of time. I mean, it may feel like dog years when you're in it, but a month, which is intensive work, or a semester, or over two so it can be done if you have a plan, right?
Yeah.
And so the next question was really just about your process. So you, Ruth, you talked about you all looking at your data and your DFW and trying to figure out what the best strategy would be. But just a little bit about any of your processes trying to facilitate these strategies. Anyone can. Everybody doesn't have to answer. Anyone can.
Well, one of the things that we, when we was able to define student success and looking at these strategies, based on the data that we gather from institutional research and effectiveness, is that our huge hurdle was our freshman and sophomore students. And what was happening is that we had a wish list of students that we wanted to come to the university. We wanted all the students to come to the university 12.9 grade ready. In the state of Mississippi, where we were recruiting our students from, those students were not coming 12.9 grade ready. So let's be truthful about the students that we're serving and how we're going to tackle these issues with those students. And not, when I say issues, not from a negative point of view, but the opportunity to educate these students. So one of the strategies that I was pushing, the area called University College, which consists of academic advising, first year, second year experience, EMAP, early monitoring program, our emerging scholars program, as well as now general studies and also our C2C program, complete to compete, is that looking at the different, one of the initial strategies was to look at the pre-indicators from the K-12 school districts, where our students are coming from. You know, we wait until the students get to the university, then we say, okay, these students not testing well, ACT or AccuPlacer, and then you want to wait until a semester or midterm that the measure the students say, okay, this student needs help. You already know that information before the student arrives on campus. You know the graduation rates. You know the ACT scores from the school district. So you know some different pre-indicators, so when that student arrives on campus, instead of that student waiting until that mid-semester, you know, after midterm, to put that student in an early monitoring program, assign that students with tutors and mentors. We did all that on the front end. You know, we have a history using that data, have the history of instructors. That conversation didn't go over too well, but you know, let's look at the history of how your past history of how many students percentage-wise pass your English 101 class. So we got an issue with that we need to work out. So it really just, one of the strategies just diving in deep, looking at the pre-indicators, as well as telling the truth about our university, how we're doing, what we're doing well and what we're not doing so well.
I can talk a little bit about our process. I talked about that initiative yesterday in a session I was in, and somebody asked, was this a faculty-driven decision or was this a top-down driven decision? And my response was, well, it was very much an administrative top-down decision. And, you know, if I could go back in time, I would probably choose to do things a little differently. Our chancellor made a goal that we were going to implement pathways in 1 year. And at the time, I was a dean of mathematics for the college. And so I remember it was right before August started, and we were all called in to our then VP, who's on leave right now, but he'll be back. And he said, okay, we're gonna do this, and we're gonna do this audit. And all the deans were like, we're gonna what? What? Okay, we'll try. And I mean, we did it, but it would have been really nice if the faculty had been able to come to the conclusion themselves, if they had had those conversations over the summer about trying to map out 15 credits and realizing, yeah, my program is 73 credits. And you just can't do that 2 years. It would have been helpful, I think, to bring our faculty in on the discussions a little earlier.
For us, it was as simple as our president saying, we have to do something different. Let's leverage our use of summer school. It doesn't matter to me what that looks like, and he issued that challenge. The beauty of this initiative, I think, was that it brought so many people to the table to really gather around getting this one thing done. We engaged our SGA, our Student Affairs Office, housing, of course, academic affairs, enrollment management. Everyone was on board. And our faculty came in and said, you know what, we haven't been taking advantage of the intersession time. When we surveyed our students to find out why they didn't participate in summer school, yes, we knew money was an issue. Many of our students, as I mentioned, are out of state. They require housing. The cost of housing significantly drives up the cost of summer school. So we removed many barriers. 2 weeks, 4 hours a day, tutoring available in the afternoon, a deeply discounted fee for the students that covered tuition, fees, the book for the class, housing, and a 2-week meal plan. What that said to our students, what it said to our parents, was that this was an investment that the institution was willing to make. When I tell you the feedback that we got back from students, gratitude all over the place, because they recognized where they had had some missteps early on, but they were very appreciative of the opportunity to make it up before it was too late. And the thing that really moved me, that touched me, was the community that was built within those classrooms. We had 25 students in each course. We had instructors who were handpicked by the deans because they had a love for freshman students. We all know that everyone is not built to teach freshmen, but those are the people that we tapped. And those are the people who signed on readily and gladly. And they were able to connect with our students in ways that some of our students weren't able to do in the entire academic year. So
you have an investment, a heavy investment on the front, but then the outcome is great because you had a increase in return rate for the next year.
That's right. 100% of the students who participated in Maymester returned the following year.
Right. Okay. So that's amazing. Okay, and so let's talk about a little bit about what you've done and engaging policy and policy makers. And so when you talk about involving faculty, or your president said this, or you're involving your community, there are lots of opportunities there to engage policy and policy makers, right? Because I was thinking about you, Nina, when you said that it would have been nice if the faculty had been involved, right, from the front. So sometimes the push doesn't come from the people doing the work. We have to just make lemons, right? So how is the work that you've done really aligned with the state level policies? And yes. So Johnny, I know that you have been very intentional in your programming to make sure that it's supporting or coinciding with some statewide initiatives.
Yeah, that was one of the first things I did outside of the university, was to meet with the local state representatives as well as our congressional representative, Congressman Ben Thompson, because the school is in the 2nd Congressional District. And meet with the state representatives was to hear their concerns about students who graduate. You know, we're trying to enhance our citizenship in these different areas. We want to, education is another thing. We want to make sure that we improve our K-12 systems, but also being able to help bridge that gap between K-12 education and also our local universities as well as our community colleges. One of the programs that we have in the state is that basically we have students who are not prepared. They can come to any one of the 8 institutions, the IHL 8 institutions, 8 state-funded universities, and come to a program called a Summer Development Program. And at our school, we call it Summer Development Emerging Scholars. And then once they complete that program, they're allowed to go to any state-funded institution. So it's about getting those students ready. But at the end of the day, working with the local state policymakers was to help them identify what they can do. What can we do to help them help us to help our state in terms of a quality education that will equate to a quality citizen, a quality town, a quality county, a quality state. And the best way was to get their attention, because they already think that we're giving too much money to the universities. That some people say we're giving too much, we're not giving enough money to the K-12 school district. But the best way that a tactic that I used to get their attention was to equate everything down to the dollar. This is how it's going to help with the economic impact of your city, of your district, of your region. And then that's when the light bulb went off. Okay, well, what can we do to make this happen? And that's how I got them involved, because you have some policymakers that really didn't understand the day-to-day operation and how the decisions that they can make at the state level can affect the institution, where they're asking that institution to educate the students, and then that student to go on to be a quality citizen. But also, really, again, it's going back just telling the truth. I think the baseline of it was really telling the truth, say these are the issues that we're dealing with in terms of making sure that students come to our university be well prepared so they can graduate in 15 to finish in 4 years, so they can go out and make some money and become a good taxpayer and citizen that goes back, to drive the economic impact. So that's what it was about.
I have one of the things I've really enjoyed about attending this conference over the last couple of days is listening to how the legislation has been used in different states to influence the work going on at community colleges. I feel like in Arizona, we have barely any legislation affecting what I do at the community college. That's not entirely true, but compared to many other states, I've always felt fortunate. I'll read the articles, listen to colleagues, and I think, wow, they are really overreach. That is legislative overreach happening over there. But I'm open to thinking that legislation can be used for good, and if we advocate correctly. I don't think that any state level policies have affected our work with the Guided Pathways Initiative. We don't get any funding from the state presently. We used to, when I started with the college 15 years ago, 30% of our income, 30% of our funding came from the state. We get nothing now, so
There's opportunity.
Maybe.
We're going to look at opportunity.
Well, for us, as with Mississippi, Oklahoma really has an emphasis on having more of its citizens complete a college degree. And as part of our state Complete College America initiative, Langston University has participated in the math pathways. So we're doing a better job of making sure our students are enrolled in the appropriate math. We have implemented co-requisite support. So this was just another way to help our students move toward timely graduation. Okay.
Oh, and so this question is really about opportunities to share the work you're doing. So at the state level, so Nina may not, you may not have this opportunity, but have you found that whether it's at state meetings or convenings that you've had an opportunity to share what's going on your campus across the state with your peer institutions? Has there been a platform or a forum for that?
We do. We have.
Okay.
Dr. Greg Bush, our former vice president, started an Arizona coalition in the community colleges. We're trying to get the 4 years on board, but we're sharing best practices, talking about how we're initiating the guided pathways, game changers, and those have been good conversations. They've been helpful.
So is that a function, a byproduct of a state-led initiative? So states have.
Not really.
So that was you all homegrown kind of.
Yeah.
Which is great still.
Yeah. Right.
I'm trying to diminish it. I was just trying to make a distinction on whether or not the state has said you need to, community colleges, get together and develop this, or if you all had seen a need and then created it, which is what you're saying. Okay.
Yeah, well, through Mississippi Institution of Higher Learning, we have monthly meetings that talk about different issues that are happening in the state with all the other 8 institutions. However, one thing that we pushed, because I really believe in this, we're not going to be able to move forward in terms of our Finishing Four initiative in the state of Mississippi if we ignore the conversation that really needs to happen with the K-12 institutions and the college and universities. And with that being said, that we pressed forward through politics, political stakeholders in the region to form the first early college program for a state university in the state of Mississippi. So, and then we had, and part of that state, another initiative, it was to work with the Mississippi Department of Education, which is a standalone, it's a whole nother conversation. So, with that being said, that's working together to look at other different, there were community colleges that were doing early college program or some people say dual enrollment, but we really want to look at it at another level. So now we're entertaining that conversation with other colleges and universities as well. So that's one of the things that we, in terms of sharing our success of what we have accomplished thus far with the Greenville Public School District this first semester. We already have about 5 or 6 other high schools are applying through MDE, having that conversation in the spring to try to kick off another 5 or 6 early college programs at other institutions.
Great.
So Maymaster is the best kept secret in our state, and we're not really sad about that. No, we have had an opportunity to share with some of our sister institutions. We're governed by the Oklahoma A&M Board, and so there are 7 institutions under that umbrella, and with those we have shared our work. We shared the idea, and there were some board members who wondered, some other presidents wondered, how are you going to finance this? Is this really a good investment? Our president recognized that it would be viewed as a risky investment, but when we returned at the beginning of the fall semester to report that we had 100% of the students return, there were many people with questions about how'd you do that? What'd you do? As far as our state coalition, we've worked very closely with them on the 2 other initiatives I shared earlier, Math Pathways and the co-requisite support. We've had opportunities to share some of the things that we're doing with co-requisite support that looks a little bit different from some of the ways that other institutions in our state have instituted the co-requisites. Our credit recovery, though, I think the overall feeling is that's great for you, little HBCU in the state with fewer than 3,000 students. We don't really need that at our institutions, and that's fine. We recognize that we each have a population to serve, and it's our responsibility to meet those particular needs of our students.
All right, so this is the last question, I think. And we've had a lot of discussion about this question, actually, about scaling the work that is being done. Because just thinking about, just like Ruth just said, that's great for your institution, but we don't need it. So how is it, like, how do you address maybe the concern or the question that lingers out there about some of the things you're doing and why it's appropriate for you and your populations at your institutions, but that's not something really that at the state level we should think about scaling? Because I would suggest that the students, they're just in different places, but the students are students no matter where they are. And so the initiative that helps a first generation student at one college, the first generation student at another college has the same needs, so that there is a potential for scalability. So how would you address those questions or concerns?
Well, I can talk about the Emerging Scholars Program. Is that, as I stated earlier, that every student that does not make the necessary ACT score to be entered into one of the state IHL institutions, if they come through this program, then they are automatically accepted into our larger universities, University of Mississippi, Mississippi State, University of Southern Mississippi, so forth and so on. But what has happened is that now a lot of those schools don't advertise it as much, so they shifting all the students to Mississippi Valley State University. So you have maybe 150 to 200 students participating in the Emerging Scholars Program, but around like 40 to 50% of those students, hopefully that we can retain them. We did a good job of retaining 85% last year, but some of those students are still going on to these different universities. So we are helping these students go into those universities 12.9 grade ready. the thing is that what we're doing well is that we're identifying the pre-indicators that we think some of the other schools should. And I have had those conversations with some of the other chief academic officers saying that, look, this is something that you need to pay attention to, that this is the data and this is how it's going to equate to a figure where that your student would not be exhausting financial aid, or you will be exhausting developmental funds are allocated to these issues. One school is that you can look at, I'm not going to name the school, but one school has a budget anywhere around $75,000 to $150,000 for developmental education, where another school spends over $1.5 million in developmental education. So look at how, if you look at different strategies or whatever, because we're still serving a lot of students at the end of the day that are similar because they're not 12.9 grade ready. If you take on some of these different strategies, you can allocate some of that $1.5 million elsewhere, you know, at your university. So I just, at the end of the day, people want to look at the bottom line, the numbers.
Follow the money.
Well, my first thought when I read this question was that we work with the riskiest students, the students at the highest risk of dropping out. And we have the least resources to do that. And if we can be successful with them, why wouldn't, what did you call them? Why wouldn't the majority institutions pay attention to that? They want to do better. They want higher success rates. In the majority institutions, I thought that I've never heard of that. Thank you for that.
PWI.
But, I think of it as our four-year institutions because I come from a community college, but their demographics are changing too. I mean, they're going to be serving our students soon anyway. They better get ready for it. And I do see a lot of collaboration in Tucson with the University of Arizona. Just this year, they are very proud to have finally become a Hispanic serving institution and have that designation. And they have reached out to us and said, help us, what do we do? We've talked to them about our active learning strategies in mathematics. We've talked to them about how we do dual enrollment. We've talked to them about our wraparound services. So they actually are inviting us in and they are listening. So I think there's hope here. I do. Thank you.
I mean, that's true. The reality for us is in a state that has experienced significant cuts to budget, state support of institutions, the only way to generate funds is tuition, which has also resulted in some of the larger institutions creating multiple pathways to admissions. So students who may have traditionally attended our institution now are being recruited by some of the larger institutions. And once they are there, they still require support. Mm-hmm. And like Nina, we have been able to provide some information and share some of the processes and initiatives that we've had that have supported students. Because at the end of the day, whether they are graduates of our institution, graduates of the institution down the street, our goal is to increase the number of educated citizens in our state and in our nation.
And so the next thing we want to do is just talk about for this project and the things that we're doing, what the next steps are. And so we're really, yesterday we had a conversation, more of the institutions, talking about strategies for us to share what we have learned throughout this process, strategies that we're using, processes that we've implemented, and being able to formalize some of those things so that other institutions can look to it as a model or as a reference as they are working with these same institutions and moving forward into more of the game changer strategies. And now we have questions, time for questions. Or did y'all have any not final thoughts, but did you have anything else you wanted to say before we ask the questions?
No, I think we're good.
Okay. All right, any questions? Yes, sir.
How does the Maymester work? Because I'm kind of thinking 2 weeks, how do you get through a course with students who couldn't do it in 15 weeks and now you're going to do it in 2? And can you do it in 2? Because we have some requirements that would have to either be like a 3 or 4 week session just because of the way the credit hours and the collective bargaining agreement happens to work.
That's right. A few years ago, we really did a lot of work in our courses to make them objective driven as opposed to activities driven. And so the idea is the students who are enrolled, this is not their first exposure to the course content. They're repeaters. Who in some instances didn't pass, they weren't successful because of attendance, a myriad of things. But being objective driven and meeting from 9 to 1:20 for 10 consecutive days allowed us to meet our seat time requirement. And the instructors did a masterful job of creating maybe a streamline of course activities that still met the objectives. Interestingly, there were some concerns about that, but in our Introduction to Sociology course, to our Introduction to Psychology course, and our History course, the same midterm and final exams were given as in the traditional semesters, and in each one of those courses, the course average was higher in the May semester than in the traditional semester.
Yes.
Hi, first of all, thank you very much for the presentation and sharing your insight. I kind of have a piggyback to something that, it's Johnny?
Yes.
That he had said. So a lot of us as MSIs, every dollar matters, right? And so for us, we have fought hard to keep tuition low. We have business people who say, hey, we can raise 5% of tuition, and don't see the fact that if we do that, we'll lose 10% of our students, right? So for us, we're very, very protective of low tuition. So my question has to do with resources, and one of the opportunities we're in HSI, we have 74% of our students are Hispanic, and most are low income. But one of the opportunities that we have is Title V funding through Department of Education. Does anyone know of any institution who has leveraged Title V funding to really kind of double down on CCA's strategies and actually build that into the model of a Title V grant?
Well, it's good you asked that question. For the CCA strategies and all the different initiatives that I discussed that are happening in University College, we comb the activity for that in Title III funding. And really that this year that I met with the president and the necessary stakeholders to map out a plan that's going to be connected to the retention plan so that the school can come off that Title III funding percentage-wise each year so they can be sustainable for the university. As they both stated earlier, that we're competing for these students across the state that are going to come into the institution underprepared. We know that. So instead of just waiting each year or reallocating those resources, you need to build a good foundation for these students to come in and be successful so that it can increase enrollment, which is going to drive tuition and revenue. But we built that in the Title III grant for this activity, but it shouldn't stay there. It should be something that the institution picks up.
Yes. Thank you. Yes.
So Mike, I had a couple of questions, but my question is primarily about financial aid and your May semester. With all the complexities of financial aid right now, how were you able to leverage any of that, or?
We did not, and it was January to May was the planning. Financial aid was at the table, our financial aid director, but it was a flat fee out of pocket, but it was so deeply discounted until the students and their families were like, what? Yes, I'm gonna hop on this. In some ways, it was an initial loss to the institution, because when I say deeply discounted, deeply discounted.
Because it sounds as if it's an important thing to do, so how?
So our SGA has insisted that we do this again. We have had time to plan, so we've been able to negotiate a little bit more with our food services vendor, so that's going to bring costs down. We've entered into another contract with our bookstore, so the books will be rented rather than purchased, so that's going to bring costs down. So we've had the time now to try to find some ways to save money as we plan fiscally for this. But it's still a commitment that our president has made, and we're going to see it through.
Any other questions? Yes.
I think sort of philosophically, what gives you hope?
For the students for this program? Well, I look this I guess it drives to, in my opinion, why did I come into this profession? Is that as I challenge everywhere I have worked from, I have seen this issue from my start of my career at Washington State University, working at a tribal college, president of a tribal college in Nebraska, HBCUs, Mississippi Valley State, Arkansas Baptist, seeing this issue at the University of Arkansas. And what gives me hope is the fact that every semester, you hear people talk about all the time that their favorite time in the semester is when students register and when they graduate. But I look at it a little deeper. It's the fact, in my opinion, that every time a student comes to your campus or my campus where I'm working, and that student, regardless of where they're coming from, regardless of their academic background, once they are accepted to your institution, then they have decided to give you the opportunity to change their lives. Now, it's an application process, but they're telling you, they're saying, Johnny, hey, I'm coming to your institution. I'm entrusting you, my family, my community, everybody's entrusting you to help make me a better citizen or provide me with education to enhance my life or to whatever I'm trying to do, get a job, whatever. So they are entrusting you with that. So what gives me hope is that my opportunity to help change someone's life, but if I don't give my 110% and look at every nook and cranny, look at data, look at different avenues for participating in CCA, look at all these different opportunities and don't give 130% to that student, I think it's criminal. Because I think you're taking something away from that student, and I think you are stealing. So that what gives me hope to continue to push these things forward, because at the end of the day, it's about creating a quality citizen that's going to create a quality state and a quality nation.
For me, it was the unexpected product of seeing faculty who walked out of that 2-week program feeling invigorated, feeling like they really made a difference in the lives of the 25 students that they worked with every day. We thought, okay, we're asking you to extend your school year for 2 weeks. Who's gonna sign up, biting nails to see if anyone would bite? But they did, and it was the people who the deans asked, they did it. But again, the community that was built. And so now, months later, faculty members walk up to us and say, I've had 4 of my students to come by my office just to check in, just to let me know that they're still here. And they want me to know that they're still here. And so those relationships would not have been established otherwise. Because in a class of 50 students in Introduction to Psychology, you know the names, hopefully, you know the faces, but the opportunity to build relationships, it's not always there. And so for the faculty to walk out saying, this was great, I feel like it made a difference, and I'm ready to do it again, was something we didn't expect, but we certainly appreciated.
Well, for me, it's the students, right? I mean, I don't get to talk to students myself that much anymore, but last night, 2 of my colleagues, they both work in student affairs. So for a couple of years, I was the dean of students at one of our campuses. Juan Pablo Santillan, I don't know if he's here, I can't see because of the lights. And Jennifer Madrid are 2 of our advisors, and they requested professional development funds to come to this conference. So we were up last night talking about this, and Juan Pablo says, well, I need to get the rest of the advisors on this 15 to finish because it works. I need to push it more. We were talking about how to get more advisors to remember what they're supposed to do. And we felt frustrated, right? And then the 3 of us said, okay, we need a good story. And Juan Pablo opens up his email and he's like, I have one. I got one today. And you know what? It was a student that wrote him and said, he also goes by JP. JP, thank you. I just turned in my graduation application And I wouldn't be done, believe it or not. I wouldn't be done if you hadn't told me I had to take 18 credits this semester. But now I'm done, and thank you. And you're right, it was hard, but I'm done. And it was a great story. It was a really nice way to end the night.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And I'm at Dillard, which is a small school in New Orleans. And I think for me, what gives me hope is that this is my first time working at HBCU. And I remember my first semester there, a parent calling me who was in Dallas about her son. And she said, "Oh, Dr. Haydel, what do you mean this boy hasn't gone to school, hasn't gone to class?" I was like, "Well, it's okay. Like, they go through this period, and I was trying to explain to her how all first-year students really go through this like little stage. And she said, "No, his dad is on the way." And I was like, "On the way from where?" And she's like, "From Dallas." Oh no, he was in Chicago. She's like, "From Chicago." I was like, "He's driving?" And she said, "Yes, he is on the way." I said, "Oh no, he doesn't need to come. You can tell him to go back home. Like, we're taking care of it. They all go through this." And she said, "You don't understand. I'm working 3 jobs so this boy could be at Dillard. He doesn't have time to figure it out." And when she said that, like, I knew that parents were working and all these things were happening to put these students through school. But when she said this, it made this real in a very different way. So these parents, these families are giving us their hopes and dreams. And and the dad was there. Like, so he showed up in my office, like, and I was like, "Oh, you really are here?" And he's like, "I am really here." And so we had to sit there and have like a little intervention and reassure him that I didn't like violate FERPA and all that kind of stuff. But so that's what it's about. And at the beginning of the semester, we have our parting ceremony where we have these, this big old tradition, and the parents leave and we do all this big stuff. And this year we had I'm only 5 feet tall, but we had this guy, like, he was bigger, like taller than you, and he just was broke down crying. And so, like, the other guy on my staff was like, "I feel like I need to give him a hug." And so, like, we have these big men who are just crying because they are like handing over their sons to us. And so so everything is there. And so we don't have an opportunity or a luxury to take this lightly. And we really don't have an opportunity or luxury to tolerate those people who do. And so, like, in my space, I tell people I don't have time for fluff. This is what this is about, because my kids are gonna be okay, And so, because I know this work and this is what I do, and I'm gonna make sure no matter where they go, that the boxes are being checked and people are paying attention and whatever that looks like. But for most of the students in our population, they don't have that luxury. And so if you are not committed to that, then I really don't have time to work with you. We have to figure out a workaround, you know what I mean? And so what gives me hope, though, is that in most situations, when people understand what the intent is and what the goals are and what the costs are for failure, they step up. So Vince Tinto said, "Set the bar high and people will rise." For students, if you set the bar high for most faculty and staff, they will rise too, or they will get out of the way, And so that's what gives me hope, because I think there are enough people, there's a critical mass that wants this to work. And we just have to develop workarounds for the people who are just like seat warming, And I really do believe that we, and I'm not, an eternal optimist. I think I'm more pragmatist. But for this, I think that we really can get the work done, Because everyone should think about these kids as though they were theirs. And so if you look at that student and imagine that that's your son or your daughter, your granddaughter, or your niece or your nephew, you approach them in an entirely different way than if it's somebody else's kid, So do y'all have any other questions? Well, we want to really thank you for spending the afternoon with us and asking questions and engaging us on this important work that we're doing at our MSIs. If you have questions for us, we'll be around here before the next session. And then just let us know. But thank you all very much. Thank you.